Roll call, Mr. Nava is here, Mr. Neely is here, I am present, Mr. Freitas and Mr. Heverly are present, Mr. Knexted is remote phone. Mr. Knexted, are you there? Gary, are you present?
Just get it over
He's trying to unmute himself right now.
You are?
Yay! Can you unmute the microphone?
Yes.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Perfect, okay, you can remove mute. We're gonna start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Nava? See, I looked your way this time.
Salute.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Have a seat, Joe.
Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan, would you like to move into action item A1?
Mr. Khan, we're ready for action item A1.
Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. I don't have the actual items in front of me.
This is the Tokay one.
Okay, so for Tokay, but also for the Needham Classroom Building, the board approved notice of completions in a previous board meeting that actually lowered the cost. So this is the lease agreement. Lease agreements are predicated on roughly 3% of the GMP of the construction project. So the lease needs to come down to match the notice of completion cost. On both of these two items, the lease will be lower. The bulk of the reason is because the projects cost less than originally anticipated.
Okay, does the board have any questions?
No questions. No questions. Your Honor.
Public comments.
Madam Chairman, I move we approve
Second.
item A1.
Thank you. Mr. Nava has motioned, Mr. Neely has second. And I will call for the public, or can we do it verbal, correct?
You can go.
Well, we have Mr.
Oh, we have
No,
Gary.
do verbal, please.
Verbal, we will do verbal. Mr. Nava?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Aye.
Mr. Porter?
Aye.
Mr. Heverly?
Aye.
Mr. Freitas?
Aye.
And I am also aye.
You have Mr. Connections.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Connected, I apologize. Thank you. Item A1 passes 7-0. We're moving on to item A2. I don't see it.
Madam Chairman, I move we approve item A2.
Second.
Mr. Nava motions, Mr. Heverly seconds. Any other board comments? Any public comments? Just to clarify, this is item A2, Needham Elementary School Modular Project, DSA Incremental 2, installation of modular and/or prefabricated classroom building lease. No questions? We are going to move to the vote. Mr. Nava.
Aye.
Mr. Knexted.
Aye.
Mr. Neely.
Aye.
Mr. Porter. Mr. Heverly.
Aye.
Mr. Freitas.
Aye.
And I am also an aye. That would be 7-0. Now, those are our two action items. I am going to drop my gavel to adjourn at, well, we're going to go 6 or 5:50. And we're going to move on to the next meeting at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
At 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Leonard.
So we have a little bit
Thank
of
you,
time.
everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
We're waiting on Mr. Fragrance. We'll get started as soon as Mr. Fragrance takes the
You can start without me.
No.
You heard? Get the hand.
Okay, roll call. Once again, Mr. Connexted is on the phone, Mr. Nava is present, Mr. Nima is present, I'm here. Mr. Porter, Mr. Heberly, and Mr. Freitas are all present. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Heberly, can you lead us? We have to do it again. Each meeting.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Heberly. Study session, we are in Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, acronym, Input, Receive, and Recommendations, Dr. Solly. Looking for you as I go around.
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board, and Dr. Washer. We have met with our stakeholder groups over the last month and a half to collect input regarding expenditures in the Lcap. Just a brief background. I'll even back up to last June when we were adopting our Lcap. It was mentioned then that June is a bad time to try to make changes to the Lcap. Now is a good time, actually. February, March, is when we're having these discussions. The bonus this year, which we have not had for several years, is there's an increase to the Lcap funding. Or another analogy, the pie has gotten larger, so we have more to utilize. The funding is due to an increase in our unduplicated student contributions from the state, which means that our low-income students and our English learners and our foster youth, we get an additional allocation per student in our LCFF and our general budget. The state has increased that amount in one of the trailer bills last June, and that funding is to be an ongoing source of income or funding for the district. So that's a bonus, and it's to the tune of about $6.5 million. Now, the parameters around that, though, from the Department of Education are to be spending those funds on direct services to students. So, however we couch that, but direct services to students. And so I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Seha, who does the heavy lifting and the writing of these articles. And we will do a brief presentation on the Lcap and then discuss what we heard from the bargaining groups, and then we have to speak with bargaining groups and the community groups.
President McFarland, before we begin with Dr. Seha, I just want to let you know who's in the room and welcome our parent representative who's here, Mrs. Ramos. And then we can, Jose can let you know what committee she's on, and we can go around and let you know who's here. Jose, would you mind starting?
Happy to. My name is Jose Maciel, coordinator for Intervention Department.
Mi nombre es Ana Ramos. Estoy representando la escuela Logan Middle School.
Ms. Ana Ramos, representing Lodi, and she is an elected member for our TLAC committee here at the district.
Thank you.
Michelle Orban, representing Lodi Education Association, teachers of the district.
I'm Jaina. I'm the CTE counselor as well as Lodi Adult School counselor, and tonight I'm the VP for LPBA.
Thank you.
Wendy Yates, representing California School Employees Association, classified.
Thank you.
Michelle Armstrong, I'm here for confidential group.
Okay. Mr. Seha, or Dr. Seha, you're ready.
All right, thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So as Dr. Solly said, the question we pose to our employee groups and also to our parent groups is the first bullet point here, and it's what staffing should we increase to provide direct services to students on school campuses with an enrollment of students who are low-income English learners and foster youth that is greater than 55%. The state provided additional funding to target these 3 student groups and school sites with large populations of these student groups on their campuses. Keeping in mind our 3 Lcap goals, we had community input meetings. We also held a thought exchange survey and collected input from our employee groups and also our parent groups in the district, our DAC and our DLAC committee. We reminded them of our 3 Lcap goals. We also provided information regarding our current expenditures. You can see down at the bottom we have our 3 Lcap goals. These are condensed versions of the Lcaps just so that they fit on one slide. But goal 1, learning environments with highly qualified personnel to maximize the academic core. Goal 2, all students demonstrate academic proficiency to prepare for college and career. And goal 3, provide positive and supportive learning environments. All right, next slide, please. Some of the common feedback we saw when we polled our multiple groups were some of the information we presented at other meetings to our board. Social emotional learning continues to be an area of where our groups feel we need additional support. Counseling is another area where our employee groups and our community feels like we need additional support. For the past few years, reducing the number of combination classes has been an identified need by our board and also our community. Additional support for English learners. Since English learners generate this funding, it would make sense to provide some additional support for our English learner students. And then academic intervention staffing, nurses, we're still in the middle of a pandemic right now, so nursing staff would be appropriate to increase to help out with some of the additional needs that we're seeing at our school sites. Our sites are also in need of additional support staff, and then the last bullet on this page is support for students with behavior issues. All right, next slide. So staff recommendation is to continue current Lcap actions. In addition, use the additional funding, the add-on concentration funding, to provide additional staffing in the following areas that align with some of the needs that are identified by our employee groups and our community groups. And then last bullet on this page is just to add additional Lcap actions as necessary to make sure we include the additional staffing in our Lcap actions and services. And the remaining slides on this PowerPoint are sample thought exchange comments from our various groups. We also included notes from our district advisory committee meeting and our DLAC meeting. And then the last few pages on this attachment are our thought exchange survey information. You can see all the participants and the thoughts they provided in the various topics. Happy to take any questions on the slideshow before we move on to the other attachments. We have one other attachment where we go over how many of each type of staffing we are proposing we provide, and then the other attachment is just guidance on how it might be appropriate to run the meeting tonight to gather input.
So do we want to go over all of the information before we take board comments or board? How would you like to, do you have questions at this point, or would you like him to continue?
Pretty best to break it up, I feel.
Okay.
That's just why it's a big document.
It is a big document.
Sure.
Okay, so let's, board comments. Anybody want to? Mr. Haverly.
Sure, I'll answer. On page 2, I don't need to go back that far, but on page 2, when it's talking about the 55%, that is the state threshold for the Lcap money, which is different than the Title I threshold. So when let's say your school is at the 55%, you get the,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I'll let Dr. say.
Are you saying,
I'm sorry.
are you
Dr.
saying
Say-
district-wide?
Yes.
District-wide.
Yeah, and the majority of our campuses exceed that 55% threshold. There's only 4 campuses that are under that 55% threshold. So when we're saying we're going to provide additional staffing at sites that exceed the 55% threshold, that's roughly 44 of our campuses that exceed that threshold.
And the other campuses get nothing.
They can get additional staffing from our supplemental and concentration funds, and they already receive some staffing from our supplemental and concentration funds. It's just with this additional pot of funds, the intent is to provide additional supports to the sites that exceed that threshold.
Yeah, and that's where I was trying to get some clarification on, is there's, so it sounds like you're saying there's the basic LCAP, and then now there's this additional AB. That is, it is the 6.5 above that.
Right. So there's base LCFF funding, which we receive for every student enrolled in Lodi Unified School District. Then we also have supplemental and concentration funding. The supplemental funding is for the 3 unduplicated pupil groups, the English learners, the low-income students, and the foster youth. And then the additional funding we receive, it's called add-on concentration funding. Since Lodi Unified School District has a large percentage of unduplicated pupils, we received additional funds, roughly $6 million, to provide additional services to those school sites that have large numbers of English learners, low-income students, and foster youth.
And Mr. Heverly, you are correct, it's different than the federal Title I threshold.
It sounds like it's divided up very similar, like the Title I money, where if you're 1 percentage point below, your school does not get Title I money. So if you're 1% below this 55%, you don't get that additional add-on.
Can I talk about that a second? Because I've been working with this CSBA, okay? And there are 3 types of funding, the base funding, and there's a thorn there. A lot of schools have been pushing, a lot of districts have been pushing to get an increase in that base funding, because the base funding impacts everybody. And then you've got, and I always get these mixed up, it's the supplemental and the concentration. I think the concentration is the one that's above 55, and then the supplemental is above,
I know, I was just going to say.
70, I think it is.
The supplemental is for any students that fall into the 3 groups.
Okay.
English learners, foster youth, and low. Yeah.
But it was-
Regardless of percentage at the school site.
Regardless, okay. And when when the state still owed us money, we didn't have to follow that so closely as far as making sure those funds go to those kids. But once we were paid off, once that the holdback was finished, then we were directed that the money was, that extra money was to be focused on those students. Is that correct? Yes, it is correct, yeah. I know that for sure, it's correct. All right. But it's not just a school though. It can go, it's much broader, because there are some funds that even those schools that are below that 55% threshold, they still got those students, and those students are still helping the district get the money, so therefore the money gets to go to those students. Does that make sense?
The base on
No, all of it.
The supplemental.
Yes.
Oh, so-
A portion of it goes there too.
The supplemental does too.
Yes. So there, I mean, of course, the schools with higher percentages are going to get more of the money. Yeah.
So what we're saying then is that the concentration money is above the supplemental money. So there's base, supplemental, and concentration. And now there's add-on concentration. So, yeah, it kind of galls me that we don't treat our students equally. And I don't mean us, I mean the state. So I wanted to make sure I just had that clarification. And you did a great job. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. I'll hold some more later.
President McFarland, I just want to acknowledge other folks that have joined us. Mr. Eric Wise, representing our supervisory group. Mr. Eric Sandstrom, representing the administrators. And welcome to our parent, Mrs. Aguirre.
Sorry I was late.
That's okay. Glad you're here.
Thank you all for joining in. Mr. Heather, no, you're done?
No, I'm done for now.
Okay. Mr. Porter?
Yeah, I just, first of all, Dr. Sale, thank you for this presentation. It's not a difficult, it's not an easy task. When I was reading through it, everything looked great, but my concern was a lot of the emphasis, from what I can glom from this, maybe you can help me, is on staffing. Would you say that your first presentation was mainly about staffing? And I'm not going to go into the nurses and then the ELA and all that. Can you give me an idea of how we're going to, I think somewhere in this I was reading where you expect 80 bilingual pairs? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's down the road, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So could you explain or give me any ideas how we are going to encourage people to work in our district in these areas? What type of incentives are we going to provide to fill these gaps that you have proposed that we need in order to be successful as students?
Yeah, and just wanted to clarify that the reason why a lot of this funding is directed towards staffing is because that was included in statute, is that the funding should be used to provide additional staffing. And I understand your concern that, you know.
Well, I have no problem with that, but I just want to know, how are you going to recruit?
Sure, we are looking at our current staffing levels and trying to make the positions more attractive. For example, with the increase, looking at our 0.375 FTE bilingual aides or our 0.5 FTE bilingual aides, increasing the FTE percentage so that they're more attractive. So wherever possible, increasing them to 0.75 contracts, which are more attractive for our community members, and they might consider applying for a 0.75 FTE contract, whereas they might not have considered applying for a 0.375. So we are looking at making the positions more attractive, you know, with the increase in staffing, trying to make them more desirable.
And this jives with Mr. Khan as well?
Yes.
Okay, because at the last meeting, his budget was contrary to that.
Yes, we are in a very tricky situation.
Excuse me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think we're getting ahead. We're going to cover that before. I'm at this section right now. I read that's what Mr. Porter's saying, but he's way ahead of the presentation.
No, I'm just curious. My main emphasis, and you're right, Joe. Thank you.
Yes.
Was how are we going to recruit when we struggle with our pairs as it is? We've had so many quit or resign, I should say, and nurses and so forth. So you're saying we're going to look at ways to incentivize them?
Correct, yeah. We're going to do our best to make the positions more attractive and wherever possible increase the full-time equivalent so that, you know, we have more applicants.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Mr. Nava?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Neely?
No, I'm fine right now.
Mr. Connexted, do you have any questions?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Freitas?
No, thank you.
Okay, moving on.
All right, if we could go to the other attachment that shows the staffing. So the information at the top is similar to what was presented on the first slide. Scrolling down, these are the staffing levels we're proposing. We're happy to take input from our board, from our employee groups and our parents to fine tune these. All of these positions that are listed here are what was included in the PowerPoint slide. Looking at, for example, the number of English learners we have at each of our sites, we established a ratio and identified that with 80 bilingual aides, we could get to a staffing ratio where we could provide support to all of our English learners across our district. The community liaison assistants are also based on English learner levels. The other positions like elementary counseling, we work with the Positive School Climate Department to identify what staffing level for elementary counseling would be appropriate. With this increase, we are going to have more sites that will have a full-time counselor. So we're increasing counseling at our elementary sites, where many more sites will have a full-time counselor, and we'll see an increase across the board.
Question, will you have elementary counselors at every elementary school or just some?
We will have elementary counselors at every elementary school, but we won't have a 1.0 FTE. We'll have, at some sites, we'll have less than a full-time shared itinerant staff. All right. Yeah, and then the first one I think is the biggest ticket item, the teachers to reduce combo classes. I know that's been a concern for the board and some of our employee groups. So we're looking to address that area by adding 24 teachers, and that doesn't completely eliminate combination classes, but that does reduce it significantly. All right. And then the other staffing levels, we work with the various departments to identify staffing that would be appropriate to meet the increasing needs at our school sites. Happy to take any questions or clarification on this table.
Okay, any questions from the board? Mr. Newman.
It's a point that I want to make, and I want us to keep this in mind as we go through this evening. Talked to Mr. Khan, and we are on track to become deficit spending very shortly. And I'm assuming that Mr. Khan has already worked in this increase in the LCAP. Mr. Khan is saying that if we don't eventually match our number of people to the needs that we have. In other words, we've got more people now than we do on the books. On the books, not present, on the books. That we're going to go into deficit spending, and therefore we will not get a positive rating. How does that jive with you guys wanting to have 193 people?
The question is well stated and thought through. Unfortunately, and I don't know if I may, the state of California has allocated a lot of funding recently, short-term funding, which we've been spending in many different areas. This funding is actually intended to be ongoing funding, to be built into our LCAP. Caveat to that would be, they increased it, they could decrease it. The other consideration is that the funding, these numbers in staff or budgeting for that staffing, we are at less than the allocation. So we're able to cover that budgetary item with the add-on concentration funding. If the enrollment decline materializes, which seems to be the case, this additional funding will also begin to shrink. But, like I said, it is covered already with the 6.4 million, somewhere in that area. This is roughly $6 million of staff. And to the question earlier, statute did ask that the funding be spent on staffing to provide direct services to students. There wasn't a lot of leeway in how to use the funding. And it is a bit of a conundrum. I mentioned in an email to Cabinet earlier that after hearing Mr. Khan speak last week, I walked in the door Monday morning and got an email saying, surprise, here's $2.5 million to improve your A to G completion rate. We knew this was coming for a few months, but it took until Monday for them to release that number. It is one of the other trailer bill gifts that keep popping up in the last several months. And so I understand the challenge with it. I guess to frame it, the good part of this discussion is that these fundings are earmarked for ongoing funds. So there would be a challenge, as Mr. Khan pointed out, to address in a declining enrollment issue, but it would be proportionate that if we lose 5%, this number of concentration would also decrease a proportionate adjusted amount. So I don't know if I overstated or overexplained or underexplained, but it is definitely confusing to square the reality of Mr. Khan's message with these additional funding costs that have been coming.
We have a Dina here.
We have our director here.
You know what, this is not a final decision tonight, as far as the report, so that's a concern for me, all right?
I have one question, Dr. Sally. The 6.1 million, is that one time or ongoing?
That is to be ongoing, unless, again, declining enrollment, that number would reduce somewhat.
Sure.
So,
But it's an ongoing extra money that.
yeah, this is meant to be factored into the Lcap each year for the foreseeable future. Again, legislature can make changes down the road, but this has been announced as a ongoing funding source and to be thought of as such.
So we do need this money with declining enrollment.
Yes.
That's going down.
Okay. Any more questions on this side? Questions on this side? We're okay?
Well, Mr. Neely asked the foremost one that was in my head is,
Yeah.
okay, I figured, it just worries me when the state says the intention is for it to be ongoing, because we all know how the state giveth and the state taketh. So we'll give you this bump, but we're going to increase your retirement costs. We're going to increase this, but we're going to. So it makes me worried, but I say hire people because we need people to serve the kids. So it's just a worry, and if we have to adjust, then that gets pretty sticky. We will adjust, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Everly. Any other board comments?
I'm just curious.
Okay, go ahead.
We have no full-time pairs right now?
We have bilingual paraeducators, we also have special education paraeducators, but general paraeducators, we only have staff that are in different roles that are acting in those positions.
I asked, are they full-time?
No, we do not have any
Why
full-time.
is that?
We've attempted to hire general paraeducators, but we have not had any luck so far.
Full-time?
Yes, full-time.
I do have one question. On this sheet that we're looking at, it kind of jumped out at me that there's no proposed mental health staffing or site administrative support. So we're going to be adding services and people, but we're not going to be doing anything with administrative support to kind of help keep things flowing and keep them in supply or whatever that they need to do their job. And the other one is the mental health staffing. Well, we all know we're in a really bad place with our students with mental health issues. So why is that? Is it that they're just not available, or we don't want to put it there?
So on the mental health issue, as you may recall, on the American Rescue Plan we presented a few months ago, we included a significant amount of mental health staffing in that plan. So in the near term, we plan to fund mental health supports out of ESSER funds, and then in long term, shift those over to LCFF funds.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better. The only problem is that a lot of those have a sunset date on them. So you're saying we would kind of move them over. Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Oh, Ron, one more thing. We've been talking for quite some time about trying to help out our Title I schools, VPs. Is that what this site administrative support is, or is that something else? I mean, we don't have, it says TBD on it.
Yes, Mr. Neely, that would be where that would fall. We did add some administrative support under the American Rescue Plan again. This is an opportunity to potentially add some additional, and you're seeking guidance if you want to proceed with
Okay,
that.
see, the added administrative support is based on temporary funding currently, and it would seem to be a good idea to maybe shift that over to permanent funding for the next few years.
Agreed. And I stated earlier, I want to emphasize again, just for, I think it's necessary that this is now the time to make those changes. When I spoke with you last June, it's sort of a please approve, but this is the time for your input in that area, and we can make some real changes, particularly this year as opposed to any other.
I'm going to glom on to Mr. Rizzo, word twice now, to Mr. Neely. Ms. Peterson, you're here, right? You said that when you were working in elementary that you would love to have a VP to handle special ed and take a lot of that load off to free you up to do your job as principal.
That's correct, yeah.
Do we do staffing that way, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, Mr. Porter, members of the board, we look at not only the student population in terms of numbers, but also the need, number of special ed, special programs, Title I, those types of things when we allocate FTE, so you are correct.
So the demands of the principal
Correct.
are fostered in within the
The demands of the school and services to the
Correct.
students, yes.
VP. All right, thank you.
That's not the way, we've had a firm number. We talked about getting away from that,
That's correct.
and we did.
We are moving away from that, yes. We
Yeah.
used to do it, well, we have though, if you recall, it's been a few years now where we put full-time VPs at some of our Title I schools.
Yes.
That was part of that move to go away from just student numbers to looking at the needs of the school. Oakwood, it's escaping me, Park Lane, there were a few that we put full-time VPs even though they weren't the highest number of students in terms of population. So we have moved away from that.
Do you factor in the percentage of that number that students assigned that are Title I students?
Yes.
What is your rubric for that? Do you have something you go by?
We don't have an exact number, but there are categories that we look at. Special ed, number of special ed students, and type of special ed program, because there's different levels of special ed needs. We look at Title I versus non-Title I. So those are the main things that we look at in addition to the number of students at the school.
So that would trigger a VPR.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Any questions from our expertise that's sitting at the tables? Yes.
I'm curious, if you are recruiting for paraeducators, why are you not making the part-timers full-timers and offering them that choice to them?
That is what we intend to do. We were just waiting to get input from board that that's the direction we wanted to head in.
Any other questions?
Yes. On the first line where it talks about teachers to reduce combo classes, wouldn't our combo support person for our 5-6 be included in the current FTE as half-time?
With the adoption of a K-8 math program, that those are no longer need to be provided.
So we don't have any combo support teachers currently?
We currently do.
We currently do, but going forward, we would not.
Correct.
Okay, so maybe I'm misunderstanding the numbers that in this chart. So the proposed 24 would to be splitting up the combos some. Do you have what the projection of combos next year and how, from what I see taking 24 away, but what's the projected number that we have?
President McFarland, if the board would like more information on that, Mr. Young is prepared to talk about that issue.
Mr. Young, we'd love to hear you.
President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer, let me just say this. We were given staffing by Adina and by Leonard. We then looked at all of our school sites based on that staffing, and we created our classrooms based on projections as well as our current numbers. We were then able to put staffing together for each school site. Our goal was to look and see if we could pull apart combo classes where they were necessary based on that staffing to ensure that there is only or no more than one combo class per elementary school site. And so that is the manner in which we looked and recommended those numbers to you.
In most cases.
Correct.
Yes.
So next year, currently.
I'm sorry, yeah.
what is
Houston School is going to continue to have more than one combo.
What is the number of combos projected before these proposed 24 throughout the district?
I will have to get you that information. I don't have the staffing right now. I just know we did the base staffing and then we looked at removing combo classes, so I can provide that to you, Michelle.
Okay, and then we have enough facilities then to break those apart for those 24? Yes.
Except for Needham School next year where we didn't know. Yes.
They're still working on it.
There are still challenges when you have a music and PE program. We know that we are still in the process of working to ensure we have spots for people, but there are classrooms for each teacher to teach at each elementary school site.
You know, how many combo classes do we have now?
So next year we will, I'm sorry, I can get that information to you. I don't have the exact numbers, but I can say this, no more than one. So if we looked at 32 elementary school sites, no more than one, minus Houston School, which will have multiple combo classes because of the small size of their elementary. So Joe, I can provide you that information.
I remember at one time we were up to 60, 58, 60, and my gosh, we worked so hard to eliminate them, and we did 28 or something like that, and I think we're making progress towards that, and I appreciate that.
I think I've heard Mr. Neely say a couple of times he'd like to see combo classes go away. So I think this is a good move in that direction to have fewer. So yes.
And is it fair to say, Mr. Young, that if the numbers change in either direction drastically, you might have to rework that? So this is a work in progress?
That is correct. We always have to see where things stand when the whites of their eyes show up at our schools with their big smiles, and then we have to make those adjustments.
I'm glad you said smiles.
Yeah.
You will be able to.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to weigh into any political endeavors at this juncture, but I do like seeing the smiles of children.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any more questions for Mr. Young?
I have a piggyback on that. You were talking about the current enrollment and projections. The projections come from the business office, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are we projecting an increase or decrease for 22-23 school year?
Overall a decrease, but I did want to mention that we held kinder flat to the more, whatever was beneficial by school site, the higher of 1920 or 2021, to hold harmless every school site.
And just so that, you know, the reason I ask that, it seems like every year the projections come out and then there's, we've got the transfer, what am I trying to say? The transfer and they'll say, well, at this elementary school, there's going to be one 5th grade and one 5-6. So, and then all of a sudden, we have 2 5th grades. And somebody had already moved in or out because of what our projection was. And that really causes a lot of angst with a lot of people in that late move and the reality of the numbers and all that kind of stuff. So the projections have worried me for a long time. And I just want to make sure that we're not undercutting too much so we have too many of those moves.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Do we know how many unfilled teaching positions we have currently? We don't have a staff member in.
Mr. Young, Dr. Washer?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. We can get it for you.
I don't either.
Mr. McGregor, do you happen to know that?
And your kinder and also your preschool class.
Mike is back there. Wait, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if that's a...
I know Park Lane. We are in the process of trying to fill a position there. We actually had to add for 4th quarter a kindergarten spot. Kindergartners are showing up everywhere in North Stockton, and so we are adding a kindergarten class, a PM kinder at Live Oak. And I believe in preschool.
Denise has got an unfilled.
Yes.
And then we have the new one because of our additional.
Yes, we are unfilled at preschool, SDC, one of which is we are finding a new teacher because we are increasing in our SDC preschool numbers. The other we're still working to fill.
Thank you. Anything else, Michelle? No? Okay, any other additional comments from anyone? Okay, moving on.
Thank you. And the third attachment is just to help guide the conversation. You're welcome to follow the guidance or proceed how you'd like, President McFarland. We thought it'd be appropriate to give each employee group a few minutes to speak, and then hear from our parents that are here to provide input as well, and then take public comment, board comment, and then provide direction for Dr. Solly and myself to further develop our LCAP.
Perfect, thank you. I see here that you have CSEA first. Mrs. Yates, would you like to go first?
Alphabetical order, yes.
So I like the fact that you want to make your paras bilingual, your paras that are special ed, your general paras, they're leaving. They're going to other districts. They don't want to be here for 6 hours. They want full-time jobs, and they're getting them at other school sites. Or if they're getting a 6-hour job, they're getting the health benefits to go as an 8-hour employee still working 6. So we need to offer those full-time positions to the employees that you have that are still here to keep them here. That's a wonderful incentive, and we want to keep them here. The library medium assistant, I see you're proposing 9 more. Is this at elementary schools, junior highs, high schools? 1 per site, 2 per site? How are you projecting where you're going to put the 9 library medium assistants?
When we were working with the IMC supervisor, she indicated that the need is at the elementary level. The middle and high school levels are staffed at higher levels, so we'd be looking at adding at the elementary level.
Okay, well, at our high school, we have over 2,000 students, and there's only one library medium assistant. That has just recently, in the last few years, been made full-time position. Prior to that, it was a part-time position. So it would be nice to have two there, one working with the students, one helping the students with checking things out, doing Chromebooks, etc. And on your CWA advisory staff, we have 8.5 right now, 8 full-time and 1 part-time. Hopefully that part-timer will be asked to be made a full-timer. And I like that you're adding more CWA. We need more CWA advisors out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Confidential employee group, Mary Diaz.
I'm here, but.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I have no comments at this time.
Great. Michelle, you're next.
We do want to thank Dr. Solly and Dr. Seha for the opportunity for our employees to meet, share, give their thoughts. We do look forward to continuing discussions about how this plays out, and appreciate the opportunity, as we spoke, to schedule another meeting. We are concerned over what has been mentioned regarding the number of full-time positions that we've heard about at the last board meeting, and going forward, we do understand that this is ongoing money. Nobody likes combos. Nobody thinks that they are the best for students. Of course, with that are many questions. And thank you, Mr. Nava, because the board has recognized the importance of bringing down those combo rates from over 60 down to 30s. We do know that it doesn't fit for everywhere, but we are concerned with recruiting teachers into those positions. And I think, no, maybe it was Mr. Heberly that just mentioned the transfer process. In splitting any of those, if we are looking at doing that at sites, may throw some kinks into personnel at other sites, but allowing those teachers to stay at their current site if that split is going as the contract allows. So hopefully before the end of the school year, that would be great for teachers to know that ahead of time. We are concerned with the recruiting. We are seeing teachers that are leaving for bonuses, to sign on the dotted line to join their districts. We feel the para pain in the classroom, and know and see paras doing a 0.3 contract at one site and then hopping for the afternoon to a 0.5 at another site. We recognize that this is not the best, but think that making them a full-time person would retain them, and retaining our employees, whether they are bilingual paras, community liaisons, CWA, is important. And that consistency helps students in the classroom and builds those relationships and keeps education going. We are concerned with the empty vacancies and recruiting teachers overall, and hope that there's something in this that we can get in recruiting teachers. I agree with Belinda in recruiting paras, an incentive to that, so they are not having to do 2 or 3 different school sites in a day jumping. We also think that it's important, that relationship between students and parents and communication, having somebody full-time on site. We do have questions on the counselors, as we know with the mental health on campuses, the counselors are important. Kind of would like to see what the ratio is going forward on the counseling and the paras, because those do directly impact every classroom. Again, we want to recruit new teachers, but we also want to retain the teachers that you have. With this, we hope that on the previous PowerPoint, there is something going forward to retaining your current teachers, your highly qualified, and those that work in the district. So I think for now, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Training for LPPA.
Okay. President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We appreciate the difficult task of navigating through this challenging time. We feel the thought exchange recognizes the needs for increase in LPPA members, including school counselors, nurses, and school psychologists. So thank you for that. We feel all members contribute to Lcap Goals of positive learning environments and college and career readiness. We are pleased to say Lcap is adding additional staffing to meet the needs of low-income English learners and our foster youth. We are proud to be members of Lodi Unified and would like to see it be the employer of choice in our area. We feel we have made a fair and balanced proposal to attract and retain school counselors, nurses, speech and language pathologists, career specialists, and school psychologists. In the past 5 years, we lost about 15 speech and language pathologists, 8 counselors, around 4 nurses to other districts and hospitals. Our negotiations team has proposed a plan to recruit and retain highly qualified personnel to meet the goals of LUSD. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity on the feedback on LCAP tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Sandstrom for the Administrative Association.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland, Dr. Washer, members of the board. On the administrative side, Lesda, you've already heard that I think one of the areas of concern is elementary administrative staffing, VPs, things like that, especially when we're seeing a greater increase in volume of specific needs that have to be accomplished quite often by one administrator, 504s, other IEP meetings, all sorts of things. It's an overwhelming load for one administrator in an elementary site, and so that's a critical need, and we appreciate that it's being addressed. Other things that we look at least from the administrative viewpoint, and mention this, it's that support staff, and we're all feeling it for those of us who are leading and guiding our schools and even district department areas. Custodial staffing is in dire need, and whatever it takes to get folks, and whether that's pay or finding out ways to recruit them, retain them. But I can tell you we're hurting all around in a lot of our support areas, both at school sites and I'll say district areas around that as well. Again, one of those needs that we appreciate the things that Dr. Asali and Mr. Seha have done as far as getting the input from folks both through our Zoom meetings and thought exchange, and we understand perfectly that I think it's great use of funding, at least for now, to have some of those things like administrative positions and so support positions and or mental health, being able to do it out of some of those monies that we have now, but that ongoing concern of how does that shift over to the LCAP later on as the monies that are not ongoing start to dry up, but they now those positions have to somehow fit into the LCAP further down the road. We expect folks here to work their magic and make that happen, and we know we will. So we appreciate that's being looked at, how we can do that, making the best use of funds now, but then also down the road, keeping it ongoing truly. One of those areas that we see, again, it's that support staffing, mental health. We really appreciate the district's focus on the social emotional learning, but we see a huge need for training, specifically both in I'll say our general staff, our teaching staff, but also in the leadership staff to help guide that on our campuses and other places, because there is a huge need for it within our student community. I will say there's even a pretty sizable need for it in our adult community, and I don't necessarily mean our parents, I mean our own staff. And I really think there's some things that we need to do as a district that we can provide through that, and again, seeing how some of those things are being addressed as well. Again, appreciate that. One of those areas that's been mentioned, we would really like to see our paraeducators, especially our bilingual paraeducators, but all of them be full-time. So if those things can be addressed where you take somebody who's 6 hours and rather than having to go get an additional 2 hours someplace else, be able to be at their site for that 7 or 8 hour day would be a tremendous help and support, because that's multiple more hours right at any given site, depending on how many paraeducators or bilingual paras they have. One of those concerns that comes up, and I mentioned to our staff at the high schools, when we go to a later start time next year, those paras that we may have over 6 hours at our site and then go to 2 hours at another site, how do they do their 2 hours at another site when our sites are now entering later in the day? And that's a real concern. If they're an 8 hour employee, they could stay at the site that they're at and get their full 8 hours in, plus provide those additional couple of hours of support at that specific site. So a variety of things, and they're being addressed, they're being discussed. We appreciate our staff's leadership in getting our input and including us in the process.
Thank you. Last but not least of our groups, supervisor group, Mr. Wise.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland, Dr. Washer, members of the board. Supervisor group doesn't have any interest in putting any more FTE towards our group, but like Mr. Sampson said, the support staff is a big hurdle to overcome sometimes. The custodial does need a little bit of help with staffing. The main thing with that is, when someone's absent, that's the hardest thing to cover at this point in time. One of my other supervisors reached out to me and to speak about groundskeeping also at the school sites and here at ESC, things like that. And that's once again one of the hard things to cover, because when someone's out, there's no one to staff that when that person's out. So if you have any questions for me or anything like that, I don't have much more to say about it other than we would like to see some FTE go towards the support staff.
Thank you very much. I just heard a phone ring, so. Gary's calling back in. We'll let her work on Gary. Moving to input from parent groups.
Yeah, I got that off. Back on now, I guess.
We've got Gary. Input from parent groups. Would anyone like to speak?
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Gracias por permitirme estar aquí en la reunión.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you tonight.
I can hear. They're barely whispering.
Mi nombre es Ana Ramos.
My name is Ana Ramos.
Tengo una niña con necesidades especiales.
I have a daughter with special needs.
Como madre de familia,
As a mother with family,
algo que a mí me gustaría hablar por las demás mamás,
an item that I would like to talk about, not only for myself, but on behalf of other mothers.
Que uno como mexicano necesita mucho personal para interpretar en los IPs.
As a person who is Mexican and Spanish speaking, we need a lot of services to help understand and communicate the difficult language that's oftentimes exchanged in an IEP.
También para nosotros es muy importante tanto los psicólogos para nuestros hijos, que a veces ellos no saben cómo expresar lo que ellos quieren decir en sus necesidades estando adentro del aula.
It is also very important for psychologists to be able to communicate in terms with expressions that are meaningful to us in ways that we can understand.
Otra de las cosas que también me gustaría es como tener un soporte para que los niños puedan expresarse, si no pueden hacer verbal, ya sea con un, no sé cómo se puede decir. Ajá.
I would also like to see multiple means for students to be able to express themselves. Oftentimes, some of our students find it difficult to express themselves verbally, perhaps having options and other means for them to do so.
Creo que es todo por hoy que estoy pidiendo para, como madre de familia, que nos den el soporte para nuestros hijos.
As a mother, these are some of the items I would like to be supported in, not only for myself, but for my children. And muchas gracias. Thank you very much. I would also like to speak on behalf of the DLAC committee. We've been meeting virtually for the last 2 years, and we've grown a lot as a committee and have also upped our computer game and technology with communicating, using the chat to exchange ideas, and also account for input. And so what we've incorporated here is approximately 15 comments that were put together and were inputted directly from our last DLAC meeting to give recommendations and suggestions that we would like to see the LCAP move in, and also take into consideration some of the challenges that EL students are currently facing with their return to daily instruction, and also dealing with some of the learning loss that took place during the last 2 years. And so the recommendations are included in your packet, along with some of the parent comments that we just took right out of the Zoom meeting and incorporated into the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to, I'm looking down my line here, District Advisory Committee Representative.
Is it okay if I, as a parent, do I support a parent group? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Could you use your mic, please?
Sorry.
Thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
Sorry about that. Thank
No,
you.
you're okay.
Dr. Washer, President McFarland Board, thank you for having parents here to speak tonight. I am a parent of 4 students, ranging from kindergarten through high school. I have about 4 different schools in the district, and I've been here for 10 years. I appreciate the information with regards to the proposed FTEs. There's a few things that I've heard, from multiple voices, and that are on my list. The first being teacher retention. So, seeing that we want to increase the proposed FTEs, obviously as a parent, I see that as a positive. Having kids at 4 different schools, we see the loss of our teachers, right? When we know that they're moving. I think that, and I don't know how this rolls into it, but retaining teachers is about making it attractive to work here, right? So we're talking salaries, we're talking benefits, and we're talking how can we be competitive with regards to our geography, so the other districts specifically. The second leg of that from a parent standpoint is dealing with the substitute shortage, or this, right, we're short subs, we know that. We have teachers that are watching 2 classes, they're owning another because we can't get enough subs. So I think that when you're talking about retention, I know that we've changed the sub rates and that's great, but I think another thing that we have to really look at is our long-term subbing. I know that this has been a problem in a lot of the schools that my kids are at. We stopped after 120 days. We're already missing out, we don't have enough, we don't have adequate sub-staffing, and then the teachers or the subs who are willing to stay and in the process of getting their credentialing and far enough along who might be PIP eligible, we're not, at least to my knowledge, we're not submitting those applications. For example, I know that in Stockton Unified, they're taking teachers who are PIP eligible, and they are offering them 2-year contracts with benefits. I mean, that's why we don't have substitutes. They would rather go somewhere else. So just those are things that I think that the board needs to think about when they're talking about how we're going to address these issues, because first and foremost, our students need teachers. I mean, we can't do anything else if they're not being educated. And then the teachers that we do have, same thing. You know, I could go on and on, but I think teacher retention, which I heard Michelle say and a couple other voices over there, for me is like top priority. I think another thing that I wanted to bring up that I don't see on here is, and I'm not quite sure where it would fall under staffing, but basically campus supervisors. Having a child at the high school level, and specifically Bear Creek and Stockton, it's a large campus with a lot of holes in it. And it's to the point where we aren't staffed adequately enough that we have to close our restrooms. So you've got 2,000 plus kids, 3,000 kids trying to find one bathroom. I mean, I'm not even gonna go into what that entails, but that's, to me as a parent, the word is unacceptable. And I don't see anything on here that speaks to that. I think, in addition, that was always an issue, but I think post-COVID, the difficulty is that while our children experienced a loss of academic learning, they also experienced a loss of social learning, and they're all far behind. And I'm sure that if you've ever heard teachers talking, they'll tell you at the high school level, at the junior high level, I mean, I have a kindergartner, and he's my last, and even I can see the difference between him and my other 3 students, and I apologize to my teacher all the time, because they just they didn't get, in any stage, that year and a half, 2 years of loss, didn't just impact academics, it impacted behavior and processing, and that spills over into the classroom, it spills over into behavior issues on campus, and I think just because of the restrictions that administrators have with how they can deal with disciplinary issues, the reality is we need more eyes and more hands on our kids. That's just the bottom line right now, and I understand that may be a temporary thing, but when I say temporary, I still think it's 3 to 5 years, and if Lcap is looking at, you know, hopefully this funding is long-term funding. I know that a couple of the board members expressed, yes, the state giveth and taketh away, but I don't see that need disappearing tomorrow or even next year. So that's another one that I don't see on here, but I think it's a critical component, especially at the junior high and high school level. I think they're kind of drowning, and the kids are paying the price because of it. The last thing that I had was, and again, a couple people spoke to it with regards to psychologists, but basically post-COVID support in terms of mental health, right? So we need psychologists, we need more of them on school site, but I think we also need, and it may go to, somebody spoke to training, it's not just emotional. I think there's a lot of retraining, a lot of healing, and a lot of learning that students need to do with regards to behavior expectations. When you go from 6th grade to 8th grade, there's a big difference in the expectations in the classroom, not just in the classwork. When you go from being an 8th grader to being a junior in high school or a sophomore in high school, there's a huge gap in development that I think, you know, is missing. So I'm not exactly sure what the answer to that would be, because I don't think you can stick 5 psychologists in every school. But I think recognizing the need for some more support in the social emotional wellness realm for students, and where that falls in the FTs, I'm not quite sure. But I definitely think that it's something that needs to be addressed. And I know that probably all sounds like wish lists in response to a budget that we know we have to be very careful about. But I do think there are important points to make. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, Dr. Washer?
Not this time.
Okay, board, any additional comments?
I don't have comments.
Okay, I'll come.
Yes. My gosh, this is really a great exposure of learning for me. You know, we generally don't get this this group speak about all the needs that they have, all the exposure of all, like for example, there's custodians, supervisors, and all these the bilingual paras full time. I didn't know that. I thought we had a full time all the time. So it's really, to me, right now is you guys have to meet the needs of all these students and the requests of these parents, providing that we spend our money wisely. I think that, like I said, we do need to have a great report on that, and I'm sure that all of you people are in the trenches. I didn't know what the needs were. I knew some when I read here, but when you express those, that gives us an emphasis to me that we need to get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Any other board comments? I'm saying it's our final go.
All right, okay then, I've got some time. All right, I was just gonna shout in my drill sergeant. All right, can you hear me now? All right. I want to take a look at the board goals, and I want to know how much those shaped the suggestions that we're seeing here. And I'm particularly interested with the board goal that says all students read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. Can you give me an idea of how your plan is going to achieve or help us with that goal? Before you begin, I want to give you some statistics here, how it's worked out in the past. Now, Dr. Washer, you and I have had a conversation about there's a difference between ELA scores and reading scores. I'm going to use them interchangeably, okay? That's just the way that is. All right. In 2015, state average on ELA was 44% pass rate. Lodi Unified at the time was 37, a 7% difference there. In 2019, we were able to cut that difference to 6.7%. Percentage points. So in those 4 years, we changed it by 0.3. 2021 test comes around. There's now a 12.3 percentage point difference in the state average and in our ELA. In other words, since 2015, state average has gone up 5 points, ours has gone down 0.3. That's been a goal of this board for quite some time. We've always talked about it. But we're not getting it done. We've agreed, the board sat down and went through all these goals, and we agreed that that was a very significant goal. One of our problems is that our kids are coming to us at greatly different levels. And they're going to require a lot more work, in some cases, to go from where they're at to 3rd grade level than in other cases, which means it's going to require more time. It's going to require more resources. It's going to require a bigger investment. And it may be outside of what we normally do. And that's okay, guys, because what we normally do isn't working. So we're going to have to step it up here. All right? So I have been talking for some time now about getting somebody to run some of the programs that we could get something at some of these schools where the kids really need extra help. I mean, let's face it, we've got kids, families living 3 to a household. We've got some real issues. I'm thinking that Dr. Dotsie could help run the program or put somebody in there in his division that could help us with this. Give him some more people, start setting some things up, and I'll bet you he would have time left over when we drop the discipline problems. Because I have found during my 11 plus years on the board now that very few of our kids that come to us for expulsion have passing grades. So I would think that if we got into the place where they could get passing grades and we worked on student engagement for these children, that we might be able to help out everybody because there'd be less problems in the classroom. But we got to put our money where our mouth is on this. We got to actually get out there and do something. So I'm a little disappointed that I don't see that in there. And when I say getting some help for these people, help them get food stamps. I mean, my God, we got kids coming to school who don't eat. If we can help the people get food stamps, then maybe we can put some more food at the house as well. Housing assistance. Maybe there's something we can do, not us personally, but bring in the experts on this. That's my point, okay? I'm not saying that Lodi Unified does this, but I'm saying that Lodi Unified coordinates it so that there are outlets, community centers at the different schools that address the issues with these parents. We have families and kids who don't have medical assistance. It's there for them, but they don't know how to get it. So we need to be able to help them. Safety concerns. Going back and forth to school and that kind of thing. But the biggest safety concern is domestic violence. Mr. Freitas's DA department runs a great program for that. I was on a communication with your coordinator for that, and she gave us a tour of it. Oh my God, there is some good stuff there. But how many people? I didn't know about it. And how many people don't know about this thing? We need somebody here to direct those parents to get the help that they need.
Actually, I'm going to jump in real quick. They have presented the domestic violence and student safety. They've actually done a program at Lodi, at Turkey High. I actually sat in and watched it.
Fantastic.
So they are reaching out to our community and our schools.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. That's great. We need to get it down at that really lower level too. After school programs, I didn't really see any uptick in that. Is that because that's a different source of funding, or it is? Okay. All right. Maybe sometime we could talk about that at another meeting, get a report on how we're doing on after school.
It's a whole study session.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Jose Maciel is actually going to be presenting later this year on the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program.
And then we're going to be talking about the preschool too as it comes up, right?
Correct.
Okay. So those are my comments. Guys, you put a lot of work in on this, and it's tough. I mean, you know, there's only so much you can do, and I get that. But I think these are some areas that we need to address, and I think we can see some return on our money for that, and that's what it's all about, seeing our kids do the best they can on the money that we're given. That's all I've got for right now until I think of something else.
Thank you, Mr. Neely.
President McFarland.
Mr. Freitas.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming here tonight. What a great discussion, and especially in this type of format, which I have to thank Board Member Neely for first envisioning several years before. This does seem a very positive way to exchange ideas. I especially appreciate the comments from our parents. Without a doubt, we work for you, and your comments are heartfelt. They have showed different perspectives, but they show us how we can improve in our schools, and that means a ton to me that you came here and that you share this. I would identify you by name, but unfortunately at this angle I cannot read your names. But both of your comments were very heartfelt, very much appreciated, and showed many things because, like I said, we do work for you. The rest of us also work for you, and I appreciate each and every one of your comments of how we can make their children's learning experience better. So I appreciate my board's comments also. We have a lot of work always to do, but if I know this team, we're going to get it done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Mr. Porter, Mr. Heberly, any comments?
Sure. First of all, thank you to the parents, both of you, and thank you to each of the employee groups. It was nice to hear different voices. With that, of course, you get different ideas and insight into areas maybe as a board, because we're kind of in a bubble, aren't aware of. And I appreciate all of you coming tonight and talking to us and sharing with us your ideas. I kind of look at this threefold. One is, what are we doing for our current staff? How are we making things better? How are we trying to retain them? What are our goals for those people so they feel part of the community? Do we need to make our pairs full-time, as I brought up earlier, as they suggested in this? How are we treating them currently? It seems to me that with all the recruiting that we need to go on, we need pairs, custodians, special ed, teachers, speech, nurses, mental health, and campus supervisors.
And with all of that comes some degree of respect. And with that means that they feel a buy-in to what's going on. And one of the ways you do that, of course, is, and it sounds kind of crude, is how well you're paying them and how well you're doing with their health benefits. Because these are people that live, like myself, day to day on a certain income that you try to sustain and do for your kids and so forth. And they're only working 3 hours a day. They're not generating that much income. And they're going to look elsewhere. That's the bottom line. The other area is custodial. We have these great facilities that we're going to, the ribbon cutting, and yet are we going to take care of them? We have a $2 million pool going in at Lodi High. Are we going to take care of it? We have a $2 million pool at Tokay, and I questioned many times how it was taken care of. Our speech pathologists were woefully understaffed. Paras woefully understaffed. And as Mr. Sampson so eloquently stated, just to get through the day where we can get kids help with bilingual, kids help with mental health, and get our staff trained to deal with the many variety of issues. We've been locked in this bubble for so long because of the epidemic. We've lost the ability to work with one another as we come out of it. There's this lack of civility. And it's because we haven't interpersonally worked with one another. We've been so used to working together. Now at the middle schools and the high schools, we're seeing behavioral situations. We also see that in our general public. And that's just a snapshot of what goes on in our schools, goes on in our public. Do we need more supervisors? Yes. Do we need more APs? Yes. I mean, we have supervisors sitting by the bathrooms so they won't be vandalized. How do our kids lose the respect for the bathrooms? And why are they damaging? And then they have to be locked, and the kids that have to go to the bathroom have to go across campus. The supervisors now are asking for passes from the teacher so they can come in. This is happening every day at our campuses. So one of the things we need to do is increase the level of respect that we have for all our staff. And one of the ways you do that by retaining them is helping them with a better daily living allowance and health benefits. We have to do that. If we're going to retain people, we're going to recruit people, we have to make it something that's palatable for them, or they'll go elsewhere because everybody else is stepping up their game. Okay? The other thing is I think we should think of is a retired pool, where we take retired teachers, retired administrators, put them into a pool if they're interested, set a wage for them. I believe that Governor Newsom now has waived a lot of the income requirements for retired teachers and their STRs. And we could use them as mentors, substitute teachers. They could come in and take an intern and work with them on lesson planning. Administrators help guide new APs so the principal can do their job. At the same time, you have a retired principal who might work with the new APs and help them do their job and maybe pick up some of the slack in other areas. So a retired pool of people that we know and have been vetted could be used. Because there's a lot of them out there that want to put 2, 3, 4, or 5 hours in a day, or maybe 3 or 4 days a week. And lastly, of course, everything revolves around how much money is actually going to be there. I'm fiscally conservative for this district. I was hired to be a fiduciary responsibility. I do not want us to go into receivership. Now, we do have a lot of money. Is it one time or is it recurring? Nobody can answer that question. So yes, we need to hire all these people, but then a year, 2 years from down the road, are we going to have to let them go? So we need to do long-term planning so we're lean and we can weather those times and we have people in places to facilitate what's best for our children. Because right now they are hurting. And our custodial staff is hurting. Our paras are hurting. Our administrators are, everybody needs help. And to do that, we need more people that are qualified. To do that, we need to up our game. So I like what was presented tonight. I'd like to see more nuts and bolts. I started off my comments on how are you going to attract people here? Because this whole presentation that I've seen and heard from our wonderful parents is we need more people. Quality people. not just a body. Remember when I got hired at Tokay, they go, okay, here you go, you have 130 students. Yeah, I did student teaching for 2 periods, and I didn't know what the heck to do. I was like relying on other teachers to help me out of their day, right? We need to up that, because things have changed. If I were to go back in the classroom now, I would struggle mightily. I've only been out 3 years. Anyway, those are my comments. I'm here to support and help. And thank you so much for coming tonight, all of you. I've learned. I love learning from your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Mr. Hatterley.
Thank you. Wow, all I could almost say is ditto what Mr. Porter said. There were a lot of issues that he brought up, a lot of things that were mentioned that I absolutely agree. And first and foremost is people. If we want direct services or even indirect services to our students, it has to take a person. And I understand that people can get expensive on an agency or a business. I get it, I know. But one of the things we have to be real careful of is that we squeeze the budget so much because we're locked in fear that we don't use the money that we have right now for the students that we have right now. Sure, you've got to keep your eye down the road. That's the prudent thing to do. I certainly don't want the district to have a shortfall, but I'm kind of one of those that says we need people now. Our children need them now. If we have to adjust, we'll adjust, okay? We'll come back in a room like this and we'll adjust. And speaking of this room, I have to tell you, I really like this setup because this is communication. And communication is not just talking, a lot of it's listening. The old saying, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. That tells you. So I really appreciate what has been presented not only by staff, but by our employee groups and our parents. One of the things that's real near and dear to my heart is safety. And I worry about our campus safety. I worry about our classroom environment. We've already mentioned it, I don't know how many times, that our kids are in need. I mean, they're silently screaming out, help me. And that's what we need to do. And that could be anything from counselors, a kind word from administrators as they get off the bus. I don't know if any of you remember Jim Jordan, but he would be out front when the bus was emptying out and he would stand there, good morning, how you doing? And I mean, I'm just going, what a wonderful thing to do. Of course, he was a great guy. But how do you do that? You have to have enough people to cover the needs of what are going on. Or let's say there is a disruptive student, okay? They need to be removed from the classroom so they can go somewhere so they can get the help that they need. You don't just go, okay, don't do that, and then send them right back, because there's probably a reason why someone, a person, has to invest the time to talk to them. If they need to be referred to a psychologist, great. Mental health clinician, great. However that has to flow, they have to be able to go somewhere before they come to us with an expulsion. That's miserable, by the way. I like the fact that we are talking about those positions, and thank you for that. And I do worry about the transition from temporary funding to ongoing funding. And I'm hoping that we hire the people in to help what's going on right now as other employees retire. We now have a core that we can pull in for as a permanent employee. We know their work ethic, we know their experience. They know our requirements and what the kids need. The other thing that I think about with safety, other than the classroom environment and student behavior is our nursing staff. They're really spread pretty thin, and I get it. It's probably not easy to hire a nurse to work at a school, because if you see what's going on with how much they're getting paid, good luck attracting them. Well, we need them too. And I don't know how anybody can, my oldest daughter's a nurse and she goes, hey, look at this. And it's an employment thing where a traveling nurse will get a $15,000 cash bonus when they walk in the door. And they're gone in 6 months. It's like, that's how critical it is. We all go all over town and we see now hiring everywhere. There is a worker shortage. So that does mean, dovetails into what Mr. Porter was saying, is what we have to take care of, and what we need, we have to attract. So all of that, I like the list, and I'm glad we asked the question about the site administration and the mental health staffing. That is already in the works. There are so many different pots of money. It's like, oh yeah, we're doing that. That's in this pot. Oh, geez. Okay, well, at least we're doing it. And we do have to keep moving forward in trying to fill positions for the sake of our children. I'll stop there. Thank you all for this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Heberly. Mr. Connexstad, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any?
Am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of great ideas, and I think we should pursue them all. But one thing we got to keep in mind, I think, is without the qualified personnel, then all the goals that we were talking about won't be reached. So, as a district, as a board, I think we should increase our efforts primarily in getting that personnel, teachers, counselors, SLP, all those folks. And having said that, we need to keep in mind that we cannot go into deficit spending, because that's not going to help anybody, and it's just going to screw things up. So my fellow board members have been very eloquent in the goals, but I think it all boils down to getting qualified personnel in the slots where we need them. And by the way, since you guys didn't hear this, I listened to Governor Newsom's State of the State speech, and one of the things he made a big deal about is that California is the 5th largest economy in the world. What he didn't mention was that California ranks down near the very bottom of per pupil spending in education. So there's work to be done, not only on our level, but on the state level. Good job, guys. Great report. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Connexstad. I would also like to thank everyone that came tonight and basically gave your heart and soul and your opinions and the people that you represent, because without your opinions, we can't make decisions based on a single information that each of us bring. So thank you for that. Dr. Salling, Dr. Sale, thank you. I would like, at some point, all the pots of money and everything that you're doing in each one of them, so we can cross-reference when we talk about the different ones. When Mr. Neely was talking, I kept thinking, I think that's covered in the ESSER. So for a quick reference for us, and maybe even the people that come next time, if you could, I think you've done it before where you showed like a diagram where the money ended up at. Just for us, quick reference, maybe to keep us on track. We tend to move a little bit from side to side. Rome was not built in a day. The last 2 years have been difficult. I feel like we've been running in place and froze about what we're going to do after, what we did before. I think all of my fellow board members had a lot of really good points, as you all did, and I think somewhere they have to merge while keeping us fiscally safe. And I know that's kind of the poo-poo word. We hear Mr. Khan talk about fiscal cliff, and then we talk about we're going to add positions. So you can imagine it sends a mixed message. Bottom line is all those positions are warranted, they're necessary, and we have to figure out a way to make it happen. while giving the best product to our students. And the best product to our students might mean giving some things to our teachers, more than they probably are even asking for, more to our site administrators than they're even asking for. Between our maintenance and our food service and our paras, we could go on and on about the different positions. But at the bottom line is we have to be fiscally sound, and that's kind of the underlining from where we're at. While everything sounds great, we have to keep it in check. But I do appreciate all of your input. Dr. Washer, what do you need from us?
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board, and thank you for acknowledging the folks who have contributed to this meeting. I do want to acknowledge our parents and thank you very much for taking time this evening to come and join us. We need direction. If you believe that we are on the right path with what was presented, if there's anything different that you would like us to look into, add, subtract, that's what we need at this point so that we can bring back something a little more tighter, something tighter next time.
Perfect. So what I think I'll do is I'll ask each board member, quickly, are we on track? Is there something that you didn't see that you want to see? Or is this a go for them to move forward? Mr. Freitas.
On track for me.
Mr. Heberly.
This portion is on track, but I do have a question.
Yes.
One of the things that I've been talking to Mr. Khan about is our Measure L, Measure U projects. We're adding physical facilities, really nice ones, and we need to make sure they're maintained. I'm already hearing Mr. Porter alluded to it, and I see Belinda's head shaking about, it just galls me to believe that some things are being vandalized at a brand new school site. You're just kind of going, what? And we all know that that's a tiny, tiny fraction of it. Of the kids. The rest of them are very respectful about it. So where does the custodial and groundskeeping, where does that all fit in? Does that go on this list or does that go on a different list?
Cross-reference.
That's that cross-reference. I think that's brilliant. We need that.
Mr. Heberly, members of the board, I think that if you express a need, then it's up to us as staff to figure out which pot it comes out of, but generally speaking, that's general fund. Unless it's COVID related, then we can use some COVID funds as well, which we have in the past. But if we're looking long-term increase in staffing, we're looking at general fund.
Okay, if I had a suggestion for some of the extended learning money, that would be at a different time. And I'll talk to you later. Thank you. Okay, that's fine. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Porter.
I'm great, but what about the parents? How do they feel about what was projected tonight for them, both parents? Jose? Mr. Macio, I'm sorry.
Para mí fue algo que se aclararon muchas cosas.
For me, this meeting was very eye-opening, and it certainly clarified a lot of questions I have.
Algo también, pues, los temas que se están tratando también están dando una solución, como poder ayudar.
The topics that are being talked about, the items, we're providing rationales and solutions to each of them.
Pues estoy un poco nerviosa porque es la primera vez que estoy.
I'm also a bit nervous because this is the first time.
Puede ser que no pueda hablar muy bien, pero estoy tratando de compartir y hacerme entender.
It's also a possibility that I can't articulate myself as well as some of you can, but I'm trying to make the best sense and understanding of what we're doing tonight.
Just fine.
Más que nada, me interesa todo esto, el saber lo que está pasando en las escuelas.
More than anything, these topics interest me, and not only what's happening, at one school, but across the district.
Cómo los maestros pueden ayudar a los padres y a los alumnos.
How teachers can help not only students but parents.
Gracias nuevamente.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Ramos, thank you.
Mrs. Aguirre? Is it Aguirre? Did I say it correctly?
Gary.
Aguirre, I
Yeah,
apologize.
that's okay. I was gonna, in general, I think that I feel like I'm on par with the rest of you, and I hear, again, you know, fiscal responsibility, and as a business owner, I understand that. I think one of the things from a parent perspective, and somebody who's been in the district for a decade, I've stepped in online for a couple board meetings. I've been to maybe 3 or 4 over the course of that time, and it does get confusing, you know, trying to follow the different pots of money. I was on an ad hoc for the ESR funding, but I will say that from a parent standpoint, at least out in the field, and I've seen it in every single school I've been at, I see a lot of waste. I see at the end of the year when we need to get our budgets in, we're just buying to get them closed. Last year, you know, I'm not sure who made the decision or who's aware, but it was at every level, boxes of supplies that were not necessary, but they had to spend the money. You're talking pallets of USBs and folders and things that a kindergartner is never going to use. So while that, I know that number would be small in relation to the overall budget, but as a parent, you know, I just have to think that there's meat somewhere on the bone that can be trimmed that really didn't need to be spent that way. I mean, even if it's a couple $1,000s and you're putting that towards even a thank you, you know, potluck for your employees, I mean, those things go a long way. And that's not to say that you're not fiscally responsible. I'm just saying there are things that parents see sometimes that kind of make you go, and I get there are a lot of guidelines with regards to how we have to spend money, where we have to spend it within the confines of each of those budgets. So I think that, you know, every parent respects the need for fiscal responsibility, but somebody, I don't recall who, also spoke to the fact that while we want to be fiscally responsible, we also need to address the here and now. And so nobody, I don't think any parent would be, especially, I'm going to be a parent till 2034 in the district, so no parent wants this district going off of a fiscal cliff. None of us want that. But we also don't want to see funding withheld or resources withheld out of the fear, someone mentioned, of what the fiscal picture is going to look like. And I also think that, you know, when you're talking about, I don't want to keep going right now, sorry, but fiscal responsibility and declining numbers, I think that maybe there needs to be another consultation with some parents or staff about why we have declining numbers, because I think that everybody can provide insight into why parents are fleeing the district and choosing other options for their students. And it's not just COVID, it's not just, you know, all the mask stuff. There's a lot of things involved with parents making decisions, and knowing that that's a big decision for a parent to make, like what would prompt this number of people to be pulling their students out of our schools and putting them in alternative education, which is affecting our budgets, right?
Correct.
So I think that those things are things too that need to be looked. It's a huge holistic picture, and I understand that. But that would be my comment about, you know, fiscal vision.
Thank you so much. Both of you have been an inspiration to me tonight and full of information. I appreciate that. And Jose, please thank Ms. Ramos as well.
Do you have any additional comments, Mr. President?
No. Thank you, Mr. Sejado, for your presentation.
Great. Mr. Neely, are we on track as a recap? Okay. Are we on track? Is there something specific?
Yeah, I've made my points very clear. And I would also like to see, this is the plan that you make, and I get that. We need to have some type of accountability on that plan. So we need to look back and say, what we have done, how did it work? You know, what we need to modify. It's that whole, I guess, what do they call it in education, the problem-solving process. In the Army, we called it the, they said circle of inquiry. We called it the problem-solving process. They called it the circle of inquiry. Anyway, we need to look back at what we've done, see the impact of it, and move on from there. Also, just real quick, I want to make it clear, you know, we talk about the declining number of teachers here, we talk about the declining enrollment. I have been involved with CSBA, which is California School Board Association, which is all over the state, and I make these meetings, and I talk to these people. Believe me, the vast majority of districts in this state are in declining enrollment. Some much worse than what we are. There's also an absolute teacher shortage, not just statewide, but nationwide. Actually, there's your business owner. There's
Everything shortage.
everybody's shortage. That's right. So I mean, we need to keep that in mind. We need to try to maybe fix those things that we can in order to make it more attractive to work here. Salary is not the biggest thing that people go on. It's big, but it's not the biggest thing. So we need to take a look at that. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Mr. Connexted.
Yeah, hi. To answer Dr. Washer's question, I would refer back to the executive summary, goal number 1, learning environments with highly qualified personnel to maximize academic core. I said that earlier, without qualified personnel, none of the goals that everybody's talking about will be reached. So I would think that, yes, Dr. Washer, we're on the right track if those are the goals you're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Connexted. Mr. Nava.
I have little to say, but I just saw 3 people on this area here. They have about a book written already down, and I know that they've taken a lot of notes, and you heard everybody, so let's get the job done and wisely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nava. I'll wrap up by saying, first of all, thank you again for your report. I think you're on the right track. I think we can't preach we need staff enough. So the magical fix is how to pay for them, how to get them, how to retain them, how to attract them. And so we're hoping that you can come back with that magical solution for us. We appreciate that. Just to speak to the students leaving, they actually have done quite a bit of research and provided the board with lots of information. And so we have those numbers. We're confident in why a lot are leaving, and the bulk of them are leaving the state. So it's very interesting when you look at it, because we assume that they're all going to neighboring districts. They're not. If it was that easy, we could waive our one and get them back. We're still going to try to retain as many as we can with our fabulous district that we have and our amazing staff, classified and certified. So, having said that, gentlemen, do you have what you need? That's a thumbs up.
Yes, thank you, President McFarland and board members. We appreciate the input, and we take all our notes back and reformulate and fine tune.
Great, and you will bring us some type of I call it a rubrics or a cheat sheet for us maybe the next time we meet, so we know what's going. Yeah. We appreciate that. Any additional comments we have? All right, we're going to adjourn. It is 7:45. Thank you all for coming.